record here. Okay, perfect. So we are now recording. So everybody be on their best behavior. Okay, so as I was talking about in this class of custom post type, we're using this init action to then run another function that I've built, this method here, which is called register post type. So as I was kind of showing off on the developer reference here, this is the register post type function. Inside here, we're passing in a post type. This is just the name of your post type. It's typically a good idea to namespace this because it will go in the database. If you take a look at the WP post table, the post type here is what's actually stored here. So let's say, for example, I have two plugins that have the post type ads created. Those two things can't exist separately. They're treated as the same thing. So so be sure to sort of namespace that. You might want to have it be like, for example, for our case, we're going to use OCWP-member. So our post type is going to be called members, but we're prefixing with OCWP just to save it in the database to make sure it doesn't clash with any other plugins. And then you have, after you've named your post type, you have an array of different things to configure essentially your post type. Down this page, you'll see a list of parameters that this can possibly be. So under this args parameter here, all of these things are things that you can pass into those arguments. And we'll go over what some of these things are. But it's important to know, and it says so somewhere on this page, but there are, obviously you don't want to use post types called any of the core internal post types like posts or page or media, things like that, because then you're going to run into some serious collision problems with WordPress core. So, it's good to kind of go look into what all these things do, but there's all sorts of generators out there, websites that specifically let you create the register post type functionality that you need. And they're a little more intuitive than sometimes doing it straight through an editor in here. So I actually did that for what I'm going through right now. And this one, Generate WP, has a number of generators. So if you take a look here, if you're looking at needing any sort of things that you want to add, they have some basic ones, but they also have some more premium ones that lets you grab that code, dump it into your editor, and then start customizing from there. It's all the same structural code. You're not taking any custom code, but what this does is it gives you a good starting point for the types of code you might run in WordPress. So again, post type generator is where I started. And right off the bat, it just gives you, like, if you copy all of this code right here, this will actually register a custom post type for you, just dropping that into like your functions.php of your theme, or if you just made your own little plugin to house this code, that would initially get you a custom post type. But it's kind of boring. It has some generic names, things like that. So what you do is you kind of go through these little tabs here, and each one has a number of options, which these all coincide with the arguments here on this page. So for example, under the post type tab, the post type key, this is what's going to be stored in the database. So if we were to do OCWP FAQs, that would be a post type key that you could use. That would be what would be stored in the database. But that doesn't obviously have to be what the name of your post type is. You can give it another name just FAQs, for example, if I can type properly. So then once you've come in here and changed a bunch of things, you just hit update code and it refreshes this little code in the bottom. And you'll see now the register post type has OCWP FAQs in here. It has the FAQs label up here. And it only changes what you've changed. It has some default values. So, you know, you may want to remove some of the things that aren't important for your particular use case. But each one of these things has the ability to go in and change them. So that's cool. Okay, so I took all that information and I dumped it into my register post type function here. And what it kind of gives you is 3 different arrays. So the first one is labels, and that's pretty much what's going to be shown in the admin. So all the things that you see as far as like the titles here, when you move something to the trash, that's a label. When you add a new, like that button has a label. So all those are configurable in the post type. So that array is full of, you know, things here that that have been customized to label our member or members post type. So that's all just strings of text. You can change those to your heart's content, whatever you want there. But I find like this list changes every so often in WordPress. So making sure you have an updated list of things is always a good idea. I think like when I first started doing this, it was like a handful of items, and now it's like triple that length. So one interesting thing in here is that you can change the featured image labels. So it's not necessarily the post type, but it changes this just for the featured image for this post type. So that will show, like, for example, the profile photo will show in the featured image box. You don't have to do any fancy like removing or re-adding back, things like that. So that's cool. Those are all the labels to kind of customize what our post type's gonna sort of present itself as in the admin. And then you have another array, which is the rewrite. The rewrite sort of capabilities. So, for example, you may see like, or you may imagine that this might be like OCWP-members/Brandon or something like that. That might be the actual URL structure. So that's what this rewrite area is going to be. The slug is related to this first part here, which is by default shows up as the same name that you register the post type under, OCWP-members. But it's a little cleaner if you hide that OCWP. So I just have it listed as member. So that shortens that down to that. And then Brandon is whatever the name of my my post type is, or my actual entry in the post type is. This with front functionality here, this is, let's say, for example, your website, if we go under permalinks here, this, like here, if you did a custom structure and you wanted your custom structure to always have like /awesome here, that would get added to that if you had with front set up. With front would get prefixed basically to your custom post type's post name. So that's not always desirable. So I've set with front to false here. I always want /members to be at the root of my site, and then whatever the slug is from there. You'll see some of these other things, pages and feeds, will allow you to set up paging. So, sorry, go back up. There we go. So feeds right here, basically you can get an RSS feed of your post type just by adding /feed to the end of it. If you say, feed is true. And then pages allows for pagination. So if I was to have like slash members, and then you could have like slash page 3, and that would be for the archive, showing the third page of all members there. So that's pretty cool. And a lot of these things, one thing to check out is like this one says the default is the value of has archive. So a lot of these settings here sort of trickle back up. So this one here, has archive, is actually right above that. The default is false for has archive. So by default, post types won't have an archive. If you come into, like, for example, show in rest, no, not show in rest, not a good one. Publicly queryable. So this one, and show UI and exclude from search, these ones all sort of trickle up to this, is your post type public? And public really determines whether it's available on the front end of your website. Like if you turn public to off, it doesn't really matter what your rewrite is, because that's not publicly available to the front end of your site. So definitely worth a read to go through these arguments when you have some time. But this last one here, EP mask, this is going to come in handy once we get sort of towards the end of the discussion. But by default, EP underscore mask is set to, it's basically like a unique number, or mostly unique number, that allows you to set particular endpoints on your post type, or on generic post type. So for example, EP underscore root. So if I was to have this EP underscore root, that would be basically the root level of your site. That's what that sort of points to. There's a number of these things. So like EP under permalink is another one. That's basically anything that has a permalink attached to it. So this is sort of like an advanced sort of piece here. But the default is EP permalink. So we'll come back to this one sort of towards the end, but it basically is just a unique number that you can attach things to just your post type if you want to. Okay, so that's the rewrites. And then the last array is basically all of the arguments as you're going to pass them into the custom post type. So you'll see that the labels here is actually sort of that labels array that we made up here is actually an item in this members argument. And then also the rewrite is also in here as well. So this is sort of the final bit of customization you can do before passing it into OCWP underscore member post type registration. And because this is something that somebody as a plugin developer, you want to make sure that you're giving yourself the ability to have somebody else take this and change it. Let's say Evan had my plugin installed, but he wanted to go through and change member to I don't know, like leadership team or something like that. He could do that by using a filter to change this. So I've added a filter in here called OCWP underscore members underscore args. So if he was to then create another plugin that had a filter on this, he could change that without having to modify all of my core code. So it's a good idea as you're going through and doing any development to be a good sort of WordPress citizen and leave filters for other people to modify what you're doing. There's sort of a side benefit of this as well, is I'm thinking very straightforward about, like, my plugin is going to be used to have a member list on my site, but it sort of gets you to think laterally about how somebody might use this functionality. So where I'm thinking in terms of members, maybe I have a directory and I'm going to do some custom things later on. Somebody else might think, hey, I want to, add some other kind of, or like all the functionality is great, but it's just labeled incorrectly for my use case. So it's just a good idea to give people who are using your plugin the ability to modify it without having to come back to you and go, hey, can you tweak this in your plugin for me? It gives people the most possible opportunities to use your plugin. So I've got this all set up. It's going to have the title, it's going to have the editor, it's going to have the post thumbnail, and it's going to have custom fields. Those are the sort of things that my post type is going to support out of the box. And in this list, you'll see also what things can be supported in here. So if you want comments, things like that, there are ways for you to just enable that without having to code all that yourself. So definitely take a look at some of these things in here to see what you need and what you don't need. Sometimes we build post types that don't need an editor because we have all the custom structure built out in meta fields or things like that. So it's not always the case that you're going to need editor. Title, you usually want to label it something, but it's, none of these are requirements for you to have. Okay, so now I've got this members args, which is, again, it's all the configuration for this argument or the post type. And I'm now going to pass that to WordPress's register post type function. So because I've named mine also register post type, I'm just adding a slash here to get me back to the root level of the namespace. So that will ultimately get me the members custom post type. So as you can kind of see in here, I do have members listed here. Oh, the other thing too is with these icons, you can specify these icons right here within your creation of your post type. You're able to use any of the dash icons that are available. If you search up dash icons, just straight up Google, you'll get to this page in the developer resources that lists out all, I think there's like 300 of these now. You can use any of these as your custom post type. So these are all available. All you have to do, if you find one you like the balloons here, if you're using it in your custom post type declaration, you can just copy this string right here, dash icons buddy icons groups, and that will just go right in here. I'm just using groups, so that's what I have in here, and that is the that is the little community icon we have for this post type. So when okay, so I've created my post type, and I've done this other thing down here, which is adding a rewrite endpoint. And what this does is basically adds the ability to, rather than just going to, let's say I have Brandon here for my members, I can then add at the end /go, and then I can add another parameter to, like, for our use case, it's going to be blog. So this URL it still points back to this actual post in here, the Brandon post, but it allows me to handle this URL differently than just the standard Brandon blog post. So we'll check out what that is here in a minute too, and that is going to connect back to the same number that we have in the EP mask. So this /go is only going to apply to our post type. If you type /go after a page or a post, it's not going to work because we have a different one here. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. We've got members here that we've created. And currently I don't have a single member in my group here. So let's go ahead and add new. So you'll see here I've got the standard Gutenberg interface. I have created a post type. I haven't done anything with like classic editing or anything like that. So if I was just going to start, I can just go start publishing just like I would want to otherwise. Um, so I've got tons and tons of content here about me because I like to write in Latin or something. And so if I just go in and publish that, we can go view my post. And there it is. I've got the Brandon Dove post. I've got all that content that I added there. And you'll see that I have /member/Brandon-Dove. So all that's sort of working as expected. I'm not, I'm not doing anything special really yet with this. So that's all good. One thing that I did, and I'm actually going to go back and break this so you can kind of see what happens, is by default, when you add a new post type, it doesn't actually set up that permalink structure for you. Even though you registered it, all that good stuff, it's not going to actually work out of the box. You have to do a little bit of work to make that happen. So I'm going to just deactivate this plugin. And then I will reactivate it. So, so by default, I do get the structure in the back end, but not the front end. Okay, so I do have my post type registered here. And if I try to view it, it's going to work because I totally did this on purpose. Hold on one second. Okay, let me. So I just deleted my rewrite rules, which you don't want to do in production. Don't do that in production. WordPress will auto-generate it, so it's back again already. I have this cool database browser that lets me kind of break these serialized pieces of things down. One second, just so I can kind of see what's in the database here. Okay, I think that's going to break it, hopefully. Okay. Okay, so at this point, I have let's pretend I just added my post type. And I've got it up here. So if I click view, okay, I can't break it. Just pretend that's a 404 because it should be a 404 by default. What you need to do is when you register your post type, you actually have to set it so that it saves the, like you can manually go into the permalinks page and save it. So if you come into here after you've created your post type and you just come to this page and click save. You don't have to change anything. That will rebuild your permalinks, but you only want to really do that one time. And if you're releasing a plugin for public consumption, you can't go, hey, just go reset your permalinks, you'll be fine. Don't even worry about it. You want to have that happen more automatically. So the way you do that is through an activation hook. So when your plugin is activated, this is basically what this is saying is, when your plugin is active or activated in the plugin admin, go run this activation code. So this is in the custom post type method for activation. And in that, we register the post type and then we flush the rewrite rules. Warnings are in here, so you can look at them after tonight, after the recording's over. But ultimately, you should never run flush rewrite rules on every single page. It will destroy your site. Like it will just take it down to its knees. So this is the recommended way to do it, is when you activate your plugin, register your post type, and then flush the rewrite rules. And then when you deactivate, the only difference is you're going to flush the rewrite rules, but you're not going to activate your custom post type because you don't want that data to continue rewriting if there's no post type. Hopefully that will make sense. So we do have the front end working here, the /member/brand and def, which is good. And I think, okay, we need to add a like a featured image because that was one of the fields we added for support. So I'll go back in here and I'll just set one of these pictures to be my profile photo. And you'll see like the name of this has changed, remove profile photo, like all these things have been customized for my post type based on what I set up. Okay, so I've updated that because I'm just running the default, I think it's a 2020 theme. It adds my featured image to the header up here, which is kind of fancy. Still has my text down here, which is all good. But I kind of want to be able to store some specific meta. Right now, this is no different than a blog post. You know, I want to be able to have this be more like a member directory or something like that, or member listing, let's say. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that everybody, whenever I add you to the member directory here, I want you to be able to add your blog link, basically the URL to your blog. So in order to do that, we're going to use meta boxes. So as we come back here, I know meta boxes aren't the same as they have been in previous versions of WordPress, but you know, we still have the ability to add them. If you use Yoast or anything like that that adds post type meta, a lot of those do use a meta box kind of feeling. And we can still do that with our custom post type. So the way to do that is to use this add meta boxes hook. So there's an action here called add meta boxes, and we're going to call back to our add meta boxes method within this class. Within this add meta boxes method, we're going to call this WordPress function here called add meta box. And we're going to give it a unique name here. So we prefix it with our OCWP, and we're just giving it member meta box for, you know, for us to sort of organize. I can add a number of different meta boxes here. So just having that unique helps me to sort of identify it later on. The title for this meta box is going to be member details, and it's going to apply here to the OCWP member custom post type. It's going to be normal priority. You can do this, I think it's high, normal, and default or something like that. Normal, we'll just put it after the next stack of meta boxes, high will make it the top one. And sometimes it positions it in a weird spot. And then default, did I get that right? Oh, I got that wrong. Sorry, this first one is the placement of the meta box. So some meta boxes can be down here, some can be in the sidebar, and then some can be like really high above the content up here. So normal is just normal at the bottom. If you change this to side, it would go on the sidebar, and advanced, I think, goes at the very top. And then this one is the priority, which I was saying before, default, high, or whatever that one is. Oops. Normal or side or advanced, and then this one is high or low or default. So default will just stack it in order, high will put it at the top, and low will put it at the bottom. So once you have that, you have a callback method here that's when you actually write the content of your meta box. You don't have to write the code for like the wrapper of the meta box. So if we comment all this stuff out and come back here and we refresh, you'll see here at the bottom there will be a meta box. Oh, there's nothing in it. Did I? Member detail. Okay. Let me come back here. My meta boxes are gone. Oh, there it is. I didn't scroll down far enough. So you'll see down here at the bottom, member details is here. It's closed by default, but when you toggle it open, it's got the content of whatever you're going to put in there. I didn't write any of the member details or the arrow or anything like that. That's provided by WordPress core simply by adding a meta box. But whatever you put inside of that that's the code you have to write. So so like I said before, I want to have an input that is basically just going to store a person's link to their website. So I'm calling that the blog link. And inside this callback for the meta box, I'm doing a couple things. This nonce field here, that's really a security feature. So we're going to check against this when the post is saved to make sure that the user is authenticated, to make sure that they're doing something that they're allowed to do, all that kind of thing. So this WP nonce field function will output a hidden field basically on your in this meta box. So let's take a look at it. Okay, so inside, whatever you write is going to go inside this inside div. And you can see these two fields right here, this OCWP-member nonce. That's what I've written here. So that's there. And this first value is what, like it turns into an encrypted piece of data, this little hash right here. And that's going to be validated when we save the content against basically this string of text plus the user's ID and the action that's being taken to make sure that they're verified to be able to do that. So definitely recommend always using a WP nonce field in here whenever you're trying to make sure that someone's doing what they should be doing. So that outputs those two fields. And then below that, you'll see I have this blog link. So that is what's here. I've got this label, the span, and then the input here. The input name is blog link, and the value, right now I don't have any value because I haven't stored anything, but it's being escaped because always escape things that are going to be printed out to HTML. I know it's going to be a URL, so I'm also escaping it as a URL. And then I'm pulling the value from the post meta table for blog link. So right now, this is coming back as an empty string. So there's nothing in here that, that is being displayed, so it's all empty. But if I come in here and put in a blog link, just paste that in and hit update, it says that it's been updated, which is very cool. That thing needs to go away so you can see it. There we go. So it stored it in here. And the way that you handle sort of the saving of this, whatever's in this, I could have 10 different fields in it if I wanted to, or just a single field like I have now. And all of that data, when you hit publish or update, gets posted to the same page. So what we have here is we have another action, surprise, that handles when you save a post, and not any post, but a post type specifically of the OCWP-member. So this is one of those actions that has sort of a general version. So save post is the general. This will run anytime a post of any post type will run. So if you're doing something across multiple post types, you might use this hook. But I know it's only going to be on the OCWP-member post type. So I've created this sort of dynamic hook that they have in WordPress for save underscore post underscore whatever the post type is. So you put that there. So that is going to go to the save post method of my class. And when we go down to that, we will see there's a couple things that you want to watch out for. When you save a post, that happens more than you hitting the publish button. You may not know that, but WordPress does this auto saving functionality where just as I'm sitting on this page, I'm not doing anything. Every about 15 seconds or so, WordPress does like a background tick of it basically does a heartbeat is what they call it. And on that heartbeat, WordPress goes, okay, I'm going to save whatever's happening in this browser window right now and just save it so that if the browser crashes or whatever, we've got a saved version of it in the browser so we can go back to it. So that happens and it triggers this save post because it's kind of saving a post, but it's doing it as like an auto save basically. So you're able to check here if the save post is being triggered with an autosave. If it is, the autosave doesn't bring any meta with you. So if you don't stop this from running on autosaves, it will actually wipe out all of your post meta when the autosaves are happening. So you definitely want to make sure that you're not doing anything on autosave. You also don't want to run any sort of saved posts on someone who's not privileged. Like for whatever reason, if somebody gained access to the back end of your site, but they were just like a user, you wouldn't want them to be able to construct a very, crafty URL and be able to save content into your website, potentially opening yourself up for a security vulnerability from that perspective. So you want to make sure that the current user is actually allowed to edit this particular post. So that's what this post ID is going for right here. And so if either of those things happen, we don't ever update anything. We just throw those away and pretend like nothing happened. If we pass those tests though, we then go and we validate that nonce that we used, that we printed out here in the member details meta box. So in here, we have the nonce field. This is the name of the field. And we're checking if it's set. If it's not set, we're going to fail. If it's verified, so this basically is saying, yeah, it's there, but is it a legitimate nonce, like that we can check against to make sure someone has permission for and all that kind of stuff. And if it's not valid, we bail. We don't save anything, but we just you know, we throw it on the wayside. So finally, we've passed all our security tests, and now we're checking to see if that piece of meta is actually there. So if the blog link, that's the name of our field, is set, then we construct, or we sanitize basically the value that was posted, and then we update post meta for this post ID with the blog link. So if I'm taking a look now and I go into posts, so this is my post in the database in the post table. And if I come in here and look at the post ID, we'll see I've got blog link, which is empty. And I've got my thumbnail ID. This is all the meta specifically for this particular post. Now, if I come back here, I'm curious why that's empty, because it said it saved it. So let's make sure. So we come back in here to my posts, and if I go down to the bottom, aha, it is empty. So I think what happened is I did not have the save post set up. So let's redo that work. Oh, gotta type. Okay, so I'll type it in there again. I'll update it, and I'll go look in the database, make sure. Okay, now we've got it saved. So that blog underscore link value is now saved as part of that post type, or that post of that post type. So I've got that. I've realized that this is way too much to say about myself, so I'm gonna get rid of some of this. All right, so this small little paragraph is pretty good. And now when I go ahead and take a look at that page again, got my photo, and it's got a little bit of text, and that's pretty good. Now, one of the things that I want to do though is I want to make sure, like I said before, that now that I have that blog link stored in the database, I want to present it so that people can click on it so they can find out more about me or find out whatever. So now I've got this stuff stored, and I've got a couple more hooks here. The first one is the content. So I'm going to filter the content when it's being written out on the front end here, and I'm going to filter it with whatever's in this blog link function. Let's check it out. So in the blog link, I'm passing the content here because I want to make sure I keep that. So I get the blog link post meta from that particular blog post, or the member post actually. I check that it's a singular version of the OCWP member post type, which it is. And I check that blog link is not empty, because you don't want to have a link put out on the page that's empty. So then what I do is I append a link that says visit my blog to the content, and I just make sure that it's escaped nicely so we don't have any security issues, URL. And what I do here is I add the permalink for that post, and then it's going to be /go/blog. So now that that is active, and I refresh this page, now I have a link here that says visit my blog. And I know it's kind of hard to see, but if you see the bottom left corner of my browser, you'll see the link says /member/brandon-dove/go/blog. Now, you'll remember that I added, when we did the register post type, I've added a rewrite endpoint for Go. So anything that now if I see /brandondev/go, it's going to come back still understanding that I'm looking at this blog post, like that wasn't a URL until I added that endpoint. But I specifically want to go to the blog. Now at this point, it doesn't really care that I've said I want to go to the blog because it doesn't know how to handle that. So we need to start looking for this when we're viewing that post. So that's where this last action comes into play. And this is template redirect. Template redirect happens pretty much right before the template is selected and rendered for any page on your site. So that goes for blog posts, it goes for this custom post type, all that kind of stuff. So we're gonna jump in right before that markup gets rendered out to the browser, and we're gonna trigger our own action because we want something different to happen there. So blog redirect here. We check to see that, again, we're looking at a OCWP member, a singular version of that. We want to make sure that the Go query variable is there. That's what we set up with the endpoint. And we want to make sure specifically that we're looking for the blog. So the way that query variables work is the first part is the variable name, and the second thing you have in here is the value of that query var. So if it's not any of those situations, we want to bail as fast as possible so that our blog pages don't slow down, our pages don't turn down or slow down, all that kind of stuff. We want to make sure we're really trying to do something with this request. So we're going to do a couple things in this redirect method. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually track the number of clicks that these member blogs get, because people might be interested in know how many clicks they get on their link from this OCWP member directory. So we set up a meta key here, which is just _clicks dash, and this creates a timestamp basically. So that's going to be for today at midnight. So that way we'll be able to know how many clicks happened every day and probably provide them with some fancy reporting features and all that kind of stuff. So that's our meta key that we're going to be storing on this post type. And then we're going to do a check here to see if a meta key has already been created for this this post for today. And if it has, cool. We'll just update that one, and that will get added. And if it hasn't, let's see, if get post meta. So if there's no post meta for this one, we're going, oh no, that's wrong, sorry. If there is post meta for this one, we're going to update it by running a special query on the database to increase it by whatever its value is +1. This is a pretty performant way of doing it. So definitely recommend doing this rather than doing like update post meta, like by getting the post meta and then setting it. It's much faster to do it all at one time. So so that's there. We're using directly the WordPress database class and making sure we're being super safe by preparing it to make sure that there's no SQL injection or anything like that. So this will increase the number if it has already had a click for today. And if it hasn't, then we're going to update that value here. So so that's all good. And then once that happens, so once we've tracked the click, we're going to then go ahead and redirect the visitor straight to that blog link so that they can get to the destination that they were looking for. So if all is well and good, if I refresh this page, it will take me to my blog link. So again, I can go here. I'm looking at the Brandon Dove page, and if I click this link, /go/blog, takes me to the end result. The user doesn't really know that things are being tracked as far as clicks, but that's sort of happening behind the scenes. And if we look here in the database, you can see that there's now a clicks for today with a number associated with it, so that we can track that number of clicks there. And if later on, if we wanted to add another one, which was like, instead of blog, maybe it's go/website, we could add another condition in the in this method of redirecting to check to see if it was blog or website or something like that. And if it was one of those things, we might go to the blog and one might go to the website. So people could have multiple URLs listed for themselves as they wanted to. So that is sort of the content as far as the post type that I wanted to cover tonight. So I'd be happy to take some questions if you have any thoughts or things that you'd like to see about custom post types. That would be great. So let me know. Feel free to add it to the Q&A. I don't see any questions in there right now. Maybe I put you all to sleep. Totally fine. But let me know if you do have any questions. If you don't, and that's totally fine. If there are other things that you have as far as questions, definitely let us know.
And if you have other comments that you'd like to make as well, you can raise your hand if you don't have a specific question. Yeah. And if you don't have anything, you're welcome to go.
I do want to say, like, we're going to continue this this same kind of stuff next month as we keep going. So if there are things that you like, I'm sort of just picking things arbitrarily that I encounter quite a lot in my work. But if there are particular types of plugin development or things that you might want to do, let me know. Like, that can definitely help to direct where this plugin development stuff is going.
So you had a question from Tom come in.
Okay.
Can you go over the escape functions you added on the front end?
Yes. Okay. So obviously escaping is super important. There's sort of two ends of it. Sanitizing before it goes into the database, and escaping when it goes out to the browser. So I will point to a really great resource here. If you look for escaping and sanitizing in WordPress. So this first one here, data sanitization and escaping. So in here, there is a list of all the different functions that we have as far as data sanitizing. A lot of them start with sanitize underscore. There's a couple, like, there used to be a sanitize underscore URL, but they just combined it with escape URL underscore raw recently. So you can use that one. It's sort of the odd man out here. But ultimately, you want to be sure when you're escaping that you're escaping within the context of how you're displaying it. So for example here, oh, that's the wrong one. For example here in the member details meta box, I am escaping a couple things here. So escape HTML is goes into the span. This is the title for my field. So if we go back in here to the back end and take a look, Okay, so blog link right here, even though it's just a bit of text, I find it's always good to escape, especially if you're using printf. The WordPress coding standards will kind of yell at you if you don't escape things. So like if I just switch to that, like you'll see this little, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little red squiggly, like you spelled something wrong kind of a line under here. And my code editor tells me when I've done something that I shouldn't have done. So this one will say all output should be run through an escaping function. And there just happens to be one for escape underscore HTML. And that's going to be basically anytime you have a text value of a node, so like something in between two HTML tags, you want to do escape HTML. Escape attribute has some special escaping that allows you to protect yourself from like cross-site or request forgery, cross-site scripting, things like that, by not allowing them to use quotes in the sort of traditional sense. Like they'll put in a quote, but it will convert those on the back end to sort of fancy like escaped versions of quotes, so that you don't ever run yourself into a security risk there. Attributes are for anything that's an attribute of an HTML element, obviously. Escape URL does URLs, kind of obvious there. There's also escape JS. Whoops. So here, escape text area. So if you have a text area, escape URL, escape JavaScript, SQL, escape like is part of the database stuff. And then there's these ones here, the underscore underscore or underscore E. These are all for translations. So for example, this one here is just a string of text, but it's set up to be a translatable piece of text. So it's being escaped, but it's also, you know, let's say you wanted this to be called not blog, but something else. You could filter this to get rid of that or change it or whatever. Or have it just be in a different language. Maybe it's called something, links are called something else in other languages. So yeah, escaping within the context of how that data is being output, that's the thing you want to watch out for, because they do escape things in different ways. Yeah, so Tom said it's surprising that you'd need to escape in the HTML you're adding to the plugin. Again, somebody like I'm assuming that the worst person on earth is going to use my plugin and try to manipulate it in the worst ways possible. Thank you, Dave. Yeah. So being extra cautious is definitely how I sort of take my stance. I didn't always develop like this. When I first started, I was in a plugin competition, and like Matt Mulleweg, Mark Jakewith, and somebody else. Mark Jakewith at the time was like the security team lead for the WordPress project. They were the people reviewing my plugin, and I hadn't done any of this stuff. And in front of a crowd of a few hundred people, he showed me why I should do this, and it's kind of changed the way I think about this stuff, because it was so easy for someone to manipulate what my code was doing that I had not intended.
Tom added a question: why even parameterize that HTML?
As far as, let's see, why even parameterize that HTML? I'm not exactly sure what that means. Do you mean just instead of just making it like putting it here, blog link? Yeah. So for me, this stuff is translation. Like, it might surprise you, but WordPress in English is not actually the most widely used WordPress. People from around the country around the world would love to have WordPress in their own languages. So the combination of all the other languages is actually bigger than English. So whenever I'm building something for public distribution, I always use these translation functions, things like that, so that they can be changed into localized languages. So yeah, okay, that's okay.
He had another question as well. Also curious if you could review the Go functionality implementation again.
Sure. So ultimately, okay, yeah. So I kind of said I'd come back, and I didn't kind of come back to this, but when registering the post type, again, whenever you're doing something with rewrites specifically, you want to do those as high up in the WordPress stack as possible. And init is the one that you really want to do that with. So we hook into init, we register our post type, and yeah, and then we add the rewrite endpoint go. So if we look at this function, ultimately what it does is it allows you to put like really any endpoint onto WordPress. This can be at the root level of your site. It can be attached to all sorts of permalink things, or just pages, or just your post type. Like, it can really be anything. So that add rewrite endpoint functionality, like I think in one other example I gave using this, you could create your own custom JSON for your, let's say I had /JSON here. Instead of doing the WordPress REST API, I could have a JSON representation of my post as well that could be consumed by other systems. So in this one, basically what this does here is just it tells WordPress, and let's go back to the rewrite rules here. So we'll go and look now. And so what you'll see is under here, yeah. So under these rewrite rules, these are all just regular expressions that WordPress evaluates every time it loads a page. So, the more complicated you make these things, the longer this list gets and the slower your WordPress site is going to be. But ultimately, it takes here member /go, and then any sort of value after go, that gets passed into the go variable here. So ultimately, WordPress, when you have pretty permalinks, you can put something like this in, but it translates it internally to something like this, which is index.php $OCWP-member. That's a query variable. And then the matches one is whatever, like Brandon-dov, that was matches one. And then go equals matches 3, because that's what comes after go there. So it takes that value right here, go equals 3, and allows it to exist in that endpoint there. And then from there, you can really do whatever you want with it. We check to see if that query variable is set in that query string, which in here, that query variable would be set. And then we check to see what the value is. The value is whatever comes after /go. And then we can take that value and do whatever we want to it at that point. And you can use, again, you can have multiple values for go just based on your whims. But it will, unless you have something that handles that, it will always point back to the originating post type entry. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so that is.
There was one more item that came up that wasn't a question, but was maybe a future topic for you. Okay. I'm going to say Arik would like to see a session that shows how to extend objects in WooCommerce, including adding them to the WooCommerce API to integrate it with external systems. So that might be something you want to take a look at for a future.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely capture that. We've had a couple sessions on WooCommerce, but I think that's that's a good one in context of plugin development, interacting with other plugins, things like that. I think that's one thing that I'd like to cover at some point in here is how to, obviously you've got probably WordPress sites with many numbers of plugins, things like that, but maybe they don't do 100% of what you want them to do. And like I said, most really good plugins will give you filters and actions to use to modify them beyond what their original use case was for. So I'd like to be able to, build something in here, which is how to modify another plugin through a plugin of your own. Because honestly, like that's how we do a lot of our professional services work. We build plugins that are custom plugins for our clients that may not be a plugin that stands on its own, but it sort of encapsulates our client's specific use case for the system that they've put together or we've put together for them. And it's sort of like sometimes our plugins exist as glue between multiple plugins, like you said, to incorporate WooCommerce with something else, or like we do work with MemberPress, WooCommerce, and Beaver Builder quite a lot. And so those things all do great things on their own, but when you start having them talk together, where you can buy a membership through WooCommerce and have that incorporate into special templates with Beaver Builder, it's all possible because they've built their plugins in a really great way, but it's not something that you can get sort of out of the box. So building small plugins like this is really useful for that kind of stuff.
Anybody else have any last minute comments or questions? Raise a hand or type in Q&A. Otherwise,
all right, I think it's good. Like I said, I'm going to post this code up to GitHub. I will also include it in a link and a comment on the Meetup, so that you can pull that down. And if you have any comments on that or questions or whatever, feel free to, or if you found a mistake, feel free to open a pull request that I can pull in. I'm happy to have additional contributors to the plugin so we can keep moving it forward.
we'll do the same with the link to the video.
Cool. Yep, exactly. All right. Thanks everybody for coming. Appreciate it. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next month. Bye.